No, please, my wife.
I am tired of suffering, Obina.
Sandra, please think of our children, Obina cried, his voice raw and desperate. Obina's household was crumbling early in the morning when most people were still sleeping in Nanobi village. Sandra, a woman once full of laughter and promises, stood with a heavy bag, her face hardened like stone. In front of her, Obina, her husband, a poor but hard-working mechanic, knelt on the bare ground, carrying their twin daughters wrapped in the only Ankara fabric she left behind, tears streaming down his oil-stained cheeks. Chidinma and Chidibear, their twin girls, were barely 4 months old. Sandra, please think of our young innocent twin daughters. They are just 4 months old, Obina cried. But Sandra only shook her head. I am tired of suffering, Obina. You promised me a better life. Look at this place. She gestured at the old zinc-roofed workshop behind them with its rusted walls, cracked concrete floor, and the few broken motorcycle parts scattered in the small yard. Without another word, she turned her back on the man, on the life they had built, on the young innocent daughters who still reached out their tiny hands to her, and walked away into the dusty road that led to the city, never looking back even once. Obina watched helplessly, sobbing as the woman he loved disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind a broken man and 2 abandoned infants. But what none of them knew was that years later, the fate Sandra chased so desperately would bring her back to this same village in a way no one ever expected. Years before that sad day, Obina and Sandra were the sweethearts of Nobi. Everyone admired their love. They had married young, full of dreams, believing that hard work and prayers would build them a future. Obina came from a long line of mechanics. His hands were tough and stained with engine oil from years of fixing broken motorcycles and old cars. Sandra, raised by a small trader, had tasted a glimpse of life in the city once when she stayed briefly with her aunt. She often spoke of big houses, fine clothes, and easy living. Obina thought he could give her all that in time. He worked day and night, fixing Okadas, repairing generators, changing brake pads. Even when customers didn't pay or his tools broke down, he never gave up. He believed that as long as they loved each other, they would survive. Then, after many years of trying, God blessed them with twin daughters, Chidinma and Chidibear. The entire village came to celebrate. Their joy was complete, but with 2 extra mouths to feed, things grew harder. Sandra grew restless. She hated wearing the same old wrappers every day. She hated the way city people visiting during Christmas looked at her like she was just a village woman. And one day, after a big fight when their last generator repair customer refused to pay, she made her decision. I can't waste my life here like this, she said coldly that morning. You and your dirty workshop can have this life. Sandra wants more. No begging could stop her. Obina begged the elders. He begged the pastor to plead with her to give him more time to fix things. But Sandra was gone. For Obina, life after Sandra's departure was a slow kind of death. The twins cried for their mother every night. Obina tried to explain, but what could a poor mechanic say to 2 broken-hearted infants? He began taking them with him to the workshop, placing them in a makeshift crib fashioned from old wooden crates as he crawled under motorcycles and cars. Some days he didn't eat so the girls could have watery Gary to drink. When the girls started walking, he patched the holes in their only pair of shoes with old rubber from tire scraps, because he could not buy them new ones. Yet even in the darkness, there were small lights. The twins, growing fast, were bright. They sang songs to cheer their father as he worked. Chidinma would hug his leg and say, "Papa, don't cry. When we grow up, we will buy you a big car." Obina would laugh with tears in his eyes. "My angels," he would say, carrying them both in his strong arms. Still, rumors floated into the village. Some said Sandra had found herself a rich man in the city. Others said she was struggling as a housemaid. No one knew for sure. But Obina told his daughters one thing every night before bed. "We will not hate her. We will become great, so that no one will ever pity us again." And with that promise burning in their hearts, they slept. One dry afternoon, 5 years after she left, as Obina sat outside the workshop, fixing a broken motorcycle chain, a dusty Okada roared into the village. A woman stepped off the back, ragged, thin, and almost unrecognizable. It was Sandra, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood two strange-looking men, each carrying brown envelopes and wearing stern faces. Obina stood up slowly, heart pounding. The twins peeked from behind the workshop door. What was happening, and why did Sandra look so scared? Obina's hands trembled as he dropped the wrench onto the ground. His heart thudded loudly against his chest. It had been 5 long years since Sandra abandoned them. 5 years of silence, pain, and unanswered questions. Now here she was, standing before him, her face thin, her once glowing skin pale and cracked. Her clothes were old and torn, but what truly caught Obina's attention were the two strange men behind her. Their shirts were tucked neatly into their trousers, and one of them carried a leather folder bulging with papers. The men didn't smile. They stared at Obina with the coldness of men who had seen too much of life. "Sandra," Obina managed to whisper, struggling to keep his emotions in check. "What are you doing here?" The twins, now about 6 years old, clutched each other tightly behind the doorway. Fear and confusion written all over their faces. Chidinma squeezed Chidi Bear's hand hard, whispering, "Is that Mama?" Sandra shifted uncomfortably under the sun, avoiding Obina's eyes. "Obina, please, I need your help," she said, her voice cracking with shame and desperation. Obina's chest tightened, memories of all the lonely nights, the hunger, the tears flashing through his mind like a lightning storm. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "What help could you possibly need from a poor mechanic like me?" he asked, his voice colder than he intended. One of the strange men stepped forward. "My name is Barrister Emma," the man said formally. "This is my colleague, Mr. Kalu. We are here because there is an urgent matter involving your wife, or rather, your ex-wife." Obina blinked. Ex-wife? He glanced at Sandra. She looked down at her dusty feet, biting her lip. Barrister Emma continued, "Sir, your wife was involved in a legal matter in Lagos. A man she trusted defrauded her of everything she had. Now there's a lawsuit, and she has been left with nothing but debts. Serious debts." Mr. Kalu opened the leather folder and pulled out some papers, waving them. "And legally," Mr. Kalu added, "since you are still technically married under customary law, part of her debts could be pushed onto you." The words hit Obina like a slap across the face. He stumbled backward, feeling the world spin around him. Sandra dared to come back after abandoning him and the children, and now she was bringing problems with her. Obina struggled to breathe. The villagers began gathering around, whispering. A small crowd formed. Some women shook their heads. Some men murmured angrily, "Is it not Obina's wife? After all these years, she's come back to destroy his life further. Chai!" Obina raised a hand to silence the noise. "What exactly do you want from me?" he asked sharply. Sandra finally looked up, tears brimming in her tired eyes. "Please, Obina, if you don't help me, if you don't claim me back as your wife properly, I will be arrested. They will take me to prison. I have nowhere else to run." There it was, the ugly truth. Sandra hadn't come back for love. She hadn't come back for the children. She came back because she needed saving. Obina clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white. Inside the workshop, the twins began crying silently, afraid. They didn't understand everything, but they knew danger when they felt it. Obina remembered the vow he made years ago, never to hate her. But this was beyond anything he had imagined. He glanced at Chidinma and Chidibear, their small faces pressed against the wall, peeking out with watery eyes. Everything inside him screamed, "No, let her face her punishment." But another part, the part that still carried the scars of their past love, whispered, "Show mercy for your daughter's sake." Before he could speak, Barrister Emma added quickly, "There is one way out. If you sign these documents saying you are legally separated and have no ties to her debts, you can protect yourself and your children." Obina's eyes darted to the papers. His mind raced. Was this a trick? Could he trust these strangers? Could he trust her? The villagers leaned in, waiting for his answer. Silence filled the air, heavy and choking. Finally, Obina spoke. His voice was low but firm. "I will think about it. I will give you my answer tomorrow." Sandra's knees buckled. She dropped to the ground, sobbing loudly, clutching at his trousers. "Obina, please. Please don't leave me to die. You know me. I was just desperate." Obina stepped away from her grip, his face filled with disappointment. "You should have thought about that the day you left your daughters crying at that door." That night, after putting the twins to sleep, Obina sat alone outside under the starless sky, staring at the papers in his hands. A million thoughts raced through his mind. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, he noticed something, or someone, moving at the edge of the workshop. A dark figure sneaking near the spare parts storage. His heart jumped. Was someone trying to steal from him? Or was it something far worse? Obina sat frozen, gripping the papers tightly as he squinted into the darkness. There, near the spare parts shed, he saw it again. A shadowy figure crouching low, moving carefully. His heart raced. In a village like Nobi, thieves were dangerous. People had lost workshops, tools, even their lives over stolen motorcycle parts. Obina rose quietly from his stool, his bare feet barely making a sound on the dry ground. He grabbed his heavy iron wrench, leaning against the wall, not for attack, but for protection. Slowly, he crept toward the shed, his eyes never leaving the shadow. When he was just a few feet away, he shouted, "Who goes there?" His voice rang out sharply into the night. The figure jerked up in fear and turned. Under the weak moonlight, Obina caught a glimpse of the intruder's face and gasped. It was Sandra, but something was wrong. Her face was wild, eyes bloodshot, her hair disheveled. She clutched a small bag close to her chest, her body shaking like a leaf in the wind. What are you doing?" Obina demanded, stepping closer. Sandra fell to her knees immediately, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, I was hungry, I had nothing. I just wanted to take a few spare parts to sell," she cried out, her voice broken, miserable. Obina stared at her, stunned. The woman who once dreamt of city life, fine clothes and air-conditioned buildings, was now reduced to stealing from a poor man's workshop. The pain that stabbed through Obina's chest was sharper than any knife. The villagers had begun gathering again, some with lanterns, murmuring as they watched the humiliating scene. "This is a shame," an old man muttered. "Greed brought her down." Another whispered, "What a fall from grace." Obina waved them away. "This is my house, my matter," he said firmly. "Go back to your homes." Reluctantly they left, leaving only the stars and the cold, awkward silence behind. Obina helped Sandra to her feet. She was so weak he could feel her bones through her torn wrapper. Without saying a word, he led her inside and sat her down at the wooden table. He dished a little leftover gari and cold soup for her. She ate hungrily, tears streaming down her face. The twins stood silently at the doorway, watching. Chidibert whispered to her sister, "Mama looks like a beggar." Chidinma said nothing. She just held her sister's hand tighter. After the meal, Obina sat across from Sandra, staring at her with tired, disappointed eyes. "You had everything you ever needed here," he said quietly. "Love, family, peace. Why wasn't it enough?" Sandra wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, her fingers trembling. "I wanted more," she whispered. "I thought the city would give me happiness. I thought maybe if I dressed better, ate better, I would matter more. But I ended up cleaning toilets in rich people's houses. When I got sick, they threw me out like garbage. I have nothing, Obina. Nothing." Silence fell over them like a heavy blanket. The twins crept closer, peeking at their mother with a mix of fear and pity. Obina sighed deeply. He was angry. He was hurt. But he was also a father, and a father had to think of what was best for his children. Just as Obina was about to speak, a loud knock rattled the door. Bam, bam, bam. Everyone jumped. Obina stood up cautiously. Who could it be at this late hour? He opened the door, and standing there were two police officers, flashlights shining into his face. "Are you Obina Nwankwo?" one of them asked sternly. "Yes," Obina said, heart pounding. The officer pulled out a paper and said, "You are needed at the police station immediately. It's about your wife and something she has hidden." Obina's blood ran cold. Hidden? What had Sandra gotten herself, and possibly him, into now? Obina's heart pounded inside his chest. The police officers stepped into the small workshop room, flashing their lights around. Chidinma and Chidibear clung to each other, terrified. Sandra, still weak from hunger, slumped back against the wall, her face pale. "What is going on?" Obina demanded, trying to stay calm. The taller officer, Inspector Bala, spoke firmly, holding up the document. "We have been investigating a fraud ring in Lagos," he said. "Your wife, Mrs. Sandra Nwankwo, is suspected to be involved. There is reason to believe she is hiding evidence connected to the crime." Obina felt the floor tilt beneath him. Fraud? Evidence? His Sandra? No, no, Obina said quickly, raising his hands. "Officer, I am a simple mechanic. I know nothing about city matters. Sandra just arrived here yesterday." Inspector Bala's eyes narrowed. "Where is the bag she came with?" Obina pointed silently toward the small bag Sandra had clutched when he caught her trying to steal spare parts earlier. The second officer, Sergeant Tunda, grabbed the bag roughly and spilled its contents onto the floor. Out tumbled a few worn clothes, a broken sandal, and then something else. A thick brown envelope stuffed with cash. Everyone gasped. The twins backed away slowly. Obina's mouth fell open. The villagers who had been peeking through the window murmured louder. Sandra buried her face in her hands and began sobbing uncontrollably. "Please," she cried. "I didn't know they hid it in my bag. I swear. I was working as a cleaner for a politician's house. One night, I saw my ogre and his friends stuffing bags with money. When the police started investigating, I ran. But I didn't steal it. I didn't know it was in my things." Inspector Bala was not moved. "You will come with us," he said sternly. "We will sort it out at the station." He turned to Obina. "You too, sir. You are her husband. Until we know your involvement, you must follow us." Obina opened his mouth to protest, but words failed him. The twins began crying loudly, clinging to their father's legs. "Papa? Papa? Don't go." Obina knelt quickly, pulling them into his arms. "Shh, my angels," he whispered, kissing their heads. "Papa will come back, I promise." His heart shattered. He had worked so hard to build a peaceful life for them. Now, because of a woman's foolishness, their world was crumbling again. As the police led them outside into the dark, cold night, villagers whispered louder, some with pity, some with scorn, others with cruel satisfaction. At the police station, the chaos continued. Obina was shoved onto a hard bench beside Sandra. Inspector Bala and Sergeant Tunda disappeared into an office to call their headquarters. Obina sat staring at the wall, numb. How had his simple life turned into this? Meanwhile, Sandra rocked back and forth on her seat, muttering to herself, "I just wanted a better life. I just wanted more." Obina closed his eyes tightly. He remembered his twin daughters' faces, small, scared, alone at home. He had to find a way out. Hours later, just as the first rays of dawn lit the sky, Inspector Bala returned. He tossed a single sheet of paper onto the table in front of Obina. "You have a choice," he said coldly. Obina leaned forward, heart pounding. "If you agree to sign this confession that you knew about the money, we will release your wife and charge you alone. Otherwise, you both stay, and your children will be sent to the orphanage." Obina's vision blurred. Take the fall for a crime he didn't commit to save the woman who abandoned him and the twins, or let her suffer and risk losing his daughters too. It was a choice no father should ever have to make. The room spun. Obina gripped the edge of the bench, sweat dripping from his forehead even in the early morning chill. The twins' faces flashed in his mind, small, innocent, vulnerable. His daughters were all he had left in this world. He couldn't lose them. He wouldn't lose them. He looked at Sandra. She sat hunched over, wringing her hands, too ashamed to even meet his eyes. A deep voice rose from somewhere inside Obina's chest, a voice he didn't even recognize. "Give me the pen," he said quietly. Inspector Bala arched an eyebrow, slightly surprised. Sergeant Tundi placed the pen and confession form before him. Obina picked it up. As he bent to sign, his hands trembling, the station door suddenly slammed open. Bang! Everyone jumped. In stormed a tall, confident young man in a sharp black suit, followed by two women carrying briefcases. The man held up a badge. "My name is Barrister Chuka Okafor," he said firmly, "from Federal High Court. This man," he pointed at Obina, "is under my protection. I have court orders regarding the investigation you are conducting." Inspector Bala's face turned from surprise to suspicion. Barrister Chuka dropped a thick file on the table. "Your investigation was flawed," he said sharply. "We traced the real criminals who used this woman as a pawn. Obina Nwankwo has no connection to the crime. In fact," he added, turning to Obina with a warm smile, "he's about to become a very rich man." Everyone stared. Obina blinked in confusion. What was happening? The unexpected inheritance, Barrister Chuka explained. Weeks ago, the politician Sandra worked for had been involved in a massive fraud operation, but during the investigation, it was discovered that one of the properties used to hide illegal money actually belonged to Obina's late grandfather, a plot of land along the main road where several businesses now operate. He continued, "Under Nigerian land law, the property rights belong to Obina as the rightful heir. The government has seized the land during the investigation, and now they are compensating Obina with millions of naira." Obina's mouth fell open. Millions. Him, a poor mechanic. Barrister Chuka smiled. "You have two choices. You can accept the government settlement or pursue a larger compensation lawsuit. Either way, you and your daughters are about to have a very different life." Sandra gasped loudly. She turned to Obina immediately, her eyes wide with sudden hope. "Obina, my husband," she cried, grabbing his hand. "We can start again. We can be a family again. Think of our children." But Obina pulled his hand away calmly. He turned to the officers. "Am I free to go?" he asked. Inspector Bala, now embarrassed, nodded silently. Obina picked up the papers slowly. He turned to Sandra, looked her straight in the eyes, and said in a calm, steady voice, "Family isn't just by blood, it's by loyalty, sacrifice, and love. You abandoned us when we needed you most. Now we will move forward without you." Sandra collapsed to the floor, weeping bitterly. Obina walked out of the station, his head held high, the early morning sun bathing him in golden light. Outside, waiting with worried faces, were Chidinma and Chidibear, still clutching each other. The moment they saw him, they ran into his arms. "Papa!" they cried. Obina dropped to his knees and hugged them tightly, tears running down his face. "My angels," he whispered, "everything will be all right now." A new beginning. Weeks later, the small zinc-roofed workshop was abandoned. Obina and his daughters moved into a beautiful new bungalow in the neighboring town. A house painted fresh white, with wide glass windows and bright flowers planted out front. Chidinma and Chidibear were enrolled in one of the best private schools in the town. Obina started a thriving auto repair business, employing other poor mechanics from Nobi village, giving them fair wages and treating them with dignity. He built a life not just for himself, but for others. As for Sandra, she left the village in shame, wandering from place to place, a living reminder of how greed could destroy everything. After Chidinma and Chidibear graduated from high school, they went to the university to study medicine and surgery and graduated with excellent results. They became medical doctors, helping the poor and carrying out free medical outreach in their village during their breaks. One evening, as the sun set behind the orange hills, Obina sat on his porch with his daughters, who had just returned for the New Year break. The twins laughed, bringing back old memories, chasing each other on the green lawn. Obina smiled deeply and peacefully. They had lost much. They had suffered much. They continued to build with their father and refused to associate with their mother, Sandra, who was still wandering around. But some villagers believed the twins should have forgiven their mother and even reconnected her with their father. But they never paid attention to any of such talks. They said they couldn't have anything to do with a mother who abandoned them when they were barely 4 months old for their father to train alone, only to return when she had problems. What is your view about this story? Do you think the twins should have forgiven their mother, or are they right by distancing themselves from her? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more inspiring stories.